Bonjour, c'est Claire à Clearly French. Today's video is a bit special. It's about a deep dive into French accents and diacritical marks, and I'll explain what they are later. We're going to see where accents and marks come from, who designed them, why they're there, and how to use them. Let's have a look at our first question. Why are accents there? What do they do exactly? Historically, as French evolved from Latin and other influences, the Latin alphabet didn't have enough characters to accurately represent all the vowel sounds in French. So to solve this, accent marks were introduced to expand the range of vowel sounds that could be indicated by a single letter. Generally, an accent is used to avoid confusion and to guide pronunciation, particularly to prevent the E from being pronounced as a schwa, which is the E, or left silent. The second question is, who actually designed them? Who decided what they should look like, what direction they have, etc.? Well, the direction was likely chosen for visual clarity and ease of use in writing and printing. The acute accent, which rises to the right, visually indicates a rising or bright sound, which is the E, while the grave accent, slanting down to the right, suggests a falling or open sound, the E. The design and direction of the accents are actually the result of a combination of scholarly decision and printing practices from the likes of Robert Estienne in the 16th century and the Académie Française in the 17th century. Let's have a look at the acute E. It's commonly used to indicate the past participle of regular verbs ending in ER. For instance, parler and aimer, to talk and to like, which becomes parler and aimer, which is talked and liked. They sound exactly the same, but they don't look the same because the E at the end is your ED in English. When E is at the beginning of a word, it often takes an acute accent, as in école, school. It also appears in the middle of words to ensure the correct pronunciation, as in préparer, to prepare, to stop it sound like préparer. Finally, the acute E can distinguish between words that would otherwise be homophones. For instance, des, which is some, versus des, which is dice. Now let's have a look at the grave E. It's often applied to the E in the middle of a word to signal it should be pronounced as an open E sound, rather than being silent or forming a diphthong. For instance, très, which is very, and collège, which is college. In some cases, it's used to differentiate verb forms, particularly in the future and conditional tenses. For example, j'achèterai, I will buy, versus acheter, which is to buy. The grave accent is commonly found on the final E in many nouns and adjectives to indicate an open E sound, especially before a silent final E. For instance, père, which is father, and mère, which is mother, have an accent to ensure the correct pronunciation of the E as a E. It is also used to clarify meaning and avoid confusion between homophones, just like the acute. For instance, on the preposition a, to distinguish it from the verb a, which is has. Similarly, it appears on ou, which is where, to differentiate it from ou, which is or. The circumflex e, that's interesting. It also opens the e into an e and is often found in certain verb conjugations, particularly in the past historic and the subjunctive, the past of the subjunctive. For instance, il fut, he was, and qu'il eut, that he had. It often indicates where a letter, typically an S, was dropped from older French spellings. For instance, forêt, forest, used to be spelled forest in Old French. Similarly, hôpital, hospital, used to be hospital. The circumflex signals this historical change, and many such words have corresponding English cognates that retain the S. Now, the circumflex can also distinguish between homophones, just like the previous two accents. For instance, du, which is due or owed, is distinguished from du without the accent, which is some. And just like mûr, ripe, is distinguished from mur, wall. In some cases, the circumflex affects pronunciation, typically making the vowel sound slightly longer and more closed. For instance, côte, which is the coast, or rib, has a longer O, a more closed O sound compared to cote, which is quota or rating. Now let's have a look at the tréma. It's considered a diacritical mark rather than accent. An accent is a subcategory of diacritical marks. It comes from ancient Greek, was adopted into Latin, and came into the French language in the Middle Ages. It is primarily used to indicate that two vowels next to each other should be pronounced separately, rather than a single sound. For instance, in Noël, which is Christmas, the tréma over the E signals that the O and the E are pronounced separately as Noël, rather than a diphthong, which would be Noël. Similarly, in maïs, it indicates that both the A and the I are pronounced distinctly, maïs. It helps in certain verb forms to ensure correct pronunciation, particularly in cases where a verb's conjugation might otherwise merge vowel sounds. For instance, in the verb haïr, to hate, the tréma makes it clear that the A and the I should be pronounced separately. Not er, but haïr. In some cases, the tréma helps distinguish homophones by altering pronunciation. For instance, back to the example of maïs, corn. If you didn't have a tréma, it would be mais, which is but. Now let's have a look at the cedilla, which is an interesting one because of its history. It's originated in medieval Spanish, developed from a small Z placed beneath the letter C in the Spanish language to indicate that the C should be pronounced as S before the vowels A, O, or U. The term cedille itself comes from the Spanish word cedilla, meaning little z, from zeta, the Spanish name for the letter Z. It was adopted into French from Spanish around the 16th century, where it served the same purpose, and then it spread to other languages, including Portuguese, Catalan, Occitan, and Albanian. The cedille is also a diacritical mark rather than an accent. As we said before, accents are subcategories of marks. It is used under the letter C, just as it was originally, to change its pronunciation from a hard K sound to a soft S, when it appears before the vowels A, O, or U. Its role is to maintain a consistent soft S sound across different forms of the same word. Take, for instance, commençons, let's begin, from the verb commencer, to begin, and français, French, from the noun France, the country. If you like this video and would like to support me, I would really appreciate if you would leave a small tip by clicking the thanks button below the video. Merci d'avance et à bientôt.